Hey guys, welcome to this video with myself, Zaboutine, the head coach of Immortals, and Keaton, the GM. And Keaton, we're gonna pretty much try to phrase our ideas going into this season, from last year at Altec Gaming to Immortals this year, how we build a roster and stuff like this. How do you feel?
I'm feeling good, actually. Coming into this offseason, we had a interesting, I guess, sort of offseason overall. We came in with about 6-7 contracts expiring for the players. So it's kind of a starting from year zero again.
Yeah, I think the core thing about this off-season has been like kind of culture change. So of course, there is like you, there's me, there is like part of remaining things from Altec, but we wanted to can start off from a blank page, having like kind of embrace the culture of Immortals and have like build and get the players around this idea. So that's why we kind of started from scratch. It's a year zero, of course. And I think that greatness is something that takes time to reach.
Yeah, and I agree. And kind of on the, I guess, topic of being a long-term sort of ordeal for us and where we're heading, not just for 2020, but 2021, 22. All of our players for the LCS are under 2-year contracts. That is something that did not happen coming into 2018 and especially to 2019.
I mean, for the rosters, so just like names, top lane is going to be SOAZ, jungle is going to be Smithy, mid lane is going to be Aka, and bot lane is going to be Altec and Hakuho. So as a head coach, I can explain a little bit what we did in terms of like idea. It's kind of self-explanatory for the jungle position. I don't think that anyone's going to come like, why did you take Xmithy, right?
Kind of getting onto Xmithy. So obviously we spoke with him right as soon as he became a free agent, essentially. In our conversations with him from the get-go, it seemed like everything was aligned to what we wanted to do. And I guess talk to me about bringing on Xmithy and how it feels, not only for him to be coming back to Immortals, especially with our new rebrand and just launch.
When you have a player like Smithy, it's really healthy to start a roster because he's a very complete player, very experienced. I know you can like think kind of like next step, which is where do I want to put more experience and where do I want to put players that want to prove themselves, right? Because this balance is very important. Yeah. And even though we have a lot of players that are kind of old and already like played in different leagues, I feel like there's a lot of like a proving factor. And I think that's kind of the idea. So I understand that people have low expectations for us because it's like players that want to prove themselves. And most of the players that need to prove themselves are players that have been either disappointing or below what people expected from them. But I think that's a good way of building a roster if you have all the players that have the same philosophy.
And that's something that, I guess, hopping into SOAZ, that's the exact thing we shared with Xmithy as well. And Xmithy actually spoke with SOAZ early on as well when we were first speaking with him. SOAZ being probably the first player we spoke to during this offseason that you had spoken with. And when we had Xmithy and SOAZ talking with each other, they aligned on everything that they saw from not only just specific players, but also the way that they approach the game and they see the game. So I guess now, not only having Xmithy, who's been, a veteran and been around this team for quite a bit, have SOAZ, who's been in from the start of competitive League of Legends.
Yeah, he was there. So I'm from the start as well as a caster, and I was like casting his games and stuff. What's important to understand with Paul is SOAZ is a very good player that didn't have a good year, and he knows it, and you know it, and everybody knows it, right? But doesn't mean that you had a bad year, you're already like a terrible player. But I understand the proving factor of it, right? And he's hungry to prove himself. And this decision hasn't been, so I've seen a lot of rant on the social media about me getting French people and stuff. Of course, they're gonna have a French bias because I know the French scene, right? And it's something we're gonna mention, like speaking about Aka. But what really led to the decision of going into SOAZ was more so, hey, Paul, what are you thinking about next year? Okay, how do you see the training? How do you see a working team? What requires a good team to win? Like, what are all the parameters that you want to have in a team? And because my vision of training and his vision of training align, because his vision of the game and the vision of the game of Jake was aligning as well, we're like, okay, if these two players align in terms of how they want to play the game and the coach and the veteran player have the same idea, then we need to find players that want to work with one philosophy and are flexible to play around this idea. We do not need 7 shot callers, including like the coach and the assistant coach. We need one voice and pushing this voice as far as we can. And this is gonna be our season 2020.
Yeah, I agree. And, I guess coming into the you know, a lot, I guess that's been talked about quite a bit, is Ica in the mid lane. You know, obviously there's the French memes. You're bringing over everyone who's French. So obviously with Adrian, who is going to be our assistant coach, go to one, and we'll speak about him as well. But also with SOAZ and with Ica, the French colony, it's arriving. You know, but memes aside and jokes aside for that, tell me a bit about Ica and just how we went into this offseason.
We've been watching the previews of Tanner, we've been watching the previews of Eugene, like Pobelter, we've been watching the previews of a lot of mid laners in NA, we've been watching a lot of previews of the mid laners in LEC. Like, we worked extensively on finding someone who would fit in the system, and from what we've seen, then it was the first to get the opportunity, and that's it. It doesn't need that we hate this player. The first player who responded like, okay, to what we had to offer with the philosophy of game that we had to offer was Aka, right? And I'm super happy to have him, because when I literally got on a call with him, I was like, okay, we got SOAZ, we got Xmithie. So SOAZ played a little bit with Aka and he really likes him in terms of like play style. I was like, what do you think of yourself in NA? I was like, that would be a great opportunity. I think I can do it.
Yeah, and you know, even speaking to Ica, you know, it wasn't just like oh, hey, you know, I'm Zab, I'm French, like I have this mid laner, he's French, cool. I had a lot of talks with Ica as well, you know, and it wasn't just about the salary mark and just the contract in general, but who he was as a person. And also knowing some of his former teammates, you know, with Joko, with Steelback, and with Nunette, the manager as well, being able to speak with them and understand what kind of person Ica is, and not just, you know, the player and how good he is in game. That's something that we can see from his performances in EU Masters or even in the LFL itself. And when you look at, you know, the scrims, or you speak with SOAZ, who filled in for these scrims with LDLC and played alongside Ica, you get to understand another opinion, especially from a veteran like SOAZ, of how this player is. You know, not just, again, personality, but now in the game and how he performs in the game. And this is something that we spoke about with Xmithie early on as well, where SOAZ had this call with Jake. They bounced a bunch of different ideas on the specific mid lane, and they both were very comfortable moving forward with Ica, and it just made the process a lot easier. And so for the bot lane, you know, I'd love to speak on the bot lane. So obviously another thing that people are going to be curious about, and it's something I'll touch on as well, is Apollo and Hakuho are not laning together. Altec will be our starting AD carry alongside Hakuho in the LCS. So tell me a bit about why, you know, going with Hakuho, but also why the idea of breaking apart this duo that's been together for the past 3 years.
I spoke about the proving factor, and SOAZ really wants to show that he's still in, right? He's still in. Aka needs to prove himself. That's kind of the same with Johnny. So Johnny is Altec. He's coming back, he's hungry. I spoke extensively with him, and he's very aware of a lot of things that were holding him back throughout the previous seasons. And I think that's kind of like working in closely, him and myself, on making sure that these things becomes his guideline for the next year and not forgetting them on the way. And if he managed to do that, I think that he's going to be able to show himself as a really consistent and the ADC that he could have been at his peak.
Absolutely. And when speaking with Altec as well, you could hear in his voice how much he wanted it and how much he wanted to come back. He's been putting in the work. He went to Korea, he grinded on the ladder, hit GM, like high GM on the solo queue ladder. He came back to NA. Yeah, exactly. He came back to NA, also hit top 15, top 10 at the end of the season as well. So he's been putting in the hard grind to make it work. For the past 3 weeks, Hakuho and Altec have been doing nonstop with each other as well. You know, they are committed to learning what one another needs in the bot lane, and also just understanding the specific champion pools and how one another plays.
And for Hakuho, usually supports have a very clear idea of what they want to do, and jungles have a very clear idea of what they want to do, and usually it's kind of like conflicts on this part. So I wanted to have someone that's not pretty much not the most vocal, but someone's gonna be very serviceable on moving with Jake and being able like to control the flow of the game with him. on par with being a great support in lane and enabling an ADC that knows how to push leads when it gets ahead in lane.
When you look at what we did with this roster, in our eyes, we really took a lot of time to find what pieces fit well together.
We built a roster that you guys on the paper might find disappointing, and I'm happy of it. I can't be happier of you guys being super disappointing and saying we're gonna be 10th place, because even if we make 10th place, the value I have from players is players that are able to work during streams very well and work as well outside of stream. What do you contribute to your team outside of streams? How do you address a problem to your teammates? How do you sit next to your teammate and helping like just getting rid of an obstacle that you have on the way? All these things, from my experience, makes a difference on the long run.
Right. And to speak on kind of the culture that we want to build out for this year as well with the team is, I guess, going back to our earlier discussion of having our players talk to one another before we brought them on is something that I found insanely important as my first year of being a general manager in 2019 is the personalities that mesh with one another. And I feel like that's one of the bigger issues as to why teams don't necessarily work out or go super far is the clashing of personalities where they're just the complete polar opposites, or even the way that they view the game can be completely separate, and that can take a what could be top 3 team into a 6th, 7th, 8th place team. And so we really focused a lot on what our players' personalities are, how do they click together, but at the same time understanding how do they feel about the game with one another. Like, do they see eye to eye on how you do this, that, the other? And everyone really got along in that sense of understanding, okay, I know what my job is going to be, this is what I have to do. And from this point forward, it just made the off season a lot easier in terms of who we wanted to bring on.
It's gonna be much more about like how much we can work more than the other or smarter than the other, and much less about like how like polish the diamond you bought is gonna shine at the beginning of the year. That's kind of the philosophy we use.
Yeah, and when we first, we've been working together ever since franchise came into play. So we're entering essentially our 3rd season together. So we've had a lot of time with one another to discuss exactly what both of our values are, what our visions are, and being on the same page and aligning on that makes not only just the off season a lot easier, but during the season in terms of just working together and understand exactly what we want to achieve at the end of the year. So it's super simple, in terms of that, but when you really think about it, bring in a new coach, or you bring in a new GM, or you bring in like a new face in general, it always can shift things up because again, you're not having the 2-3 years of time that we've had to understand exactly what we want. And so we have the roster we want, we have the players that we want.
And we have a company that's backing us up on like creating something that's gonna work on the long term. And fortunately, this is gonna pay off for this year. And we're thanks guys for all the ones that like send us warm support messages, just cheering for us, all the Immortals fans that are still here, that were waiting, secretly in a room that Immortals might come back. So we're back. We have a roster that I understand is up to debate. We took some we make some decisions that are maybe not the most common, but at the end of the day, we create a thing where we feel like we can, as well as a management, have an impact on, and we can lead to success. And that's kind of has been our key word. So yeah, thanks again for your support. That was kind of like a small vlog on explaining our minds. And yeah, guys, see you guys on the Rift for the next year. And thanks again for supporting us.